So I want you, Dan, if you can, break out the four pillars at Salomon Ludwin and what makes Salomon Ludwin unique from other financial planners.
Well, I think, we've always said this when talking to prospective clients is that I think that most financial advisors sound alike, speak the same language, offer very similar services, at least verbally. I think the thing that we've learned over time is that it's one thing to say something, it's another thing to do it, which is kind of what our practice has always been built on, is the ability to offer certain services and make sure that we deliver on those services. And over the last couple of years, we've had the opportunity to kind of more clearly define who we are, who we serve, and how we serve them. And we boiled it down to these four pillars that we've always done, but I think have tried to fortify our efforts and communications around.
Start with the pillar of risk management.
So risk management is kind of the, that's the big one, right? Because that's the one that makes you smile or cry. And we've tried to build trigger point risk management around this key component of understanding what we need and what we want in terms of participating in good markets, but also preparing for and being comfortable with the short-term downside that can sometimes present itself from markets. So defining what your target allocation is for us is hugely important, but then monitoring where we are relative to our target allocation becomes an ongoing evaluation. And we have built Trigger Point, that discipline, to be able to sell on strength and buy on weakness, to not only take advantage of market volatility, but also to realign us back to that target allocation.
Tell me more. That's another pillar here, cash flow planning.
Yeah.
Right? We want to be able to generate enough stream of cash flow to cover expected and unexpected costs of life. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, risk management isn't the exciting part, but I think it's kind of the engine that you've got to have. The cash flow piece is what makes it, for us, really personal and very candidly, really emotional for clients. Because when times are good, no one's sitting on the edge of their seat worried about, is the Dow going to go up, or how is this going to affect my ability to take a trip this year or buy a car? It's when the markets are volatile, down, headlines are scary. That's where people tend to make bad decisions. And it's our goal, it's our hope that we can have enough profits taken during good times to allow clients to fund their spending needs without having to worry about what the market's doing day to day.
And there is always going to be that where you have this idea in your head that I'm going to work until this age. There are seen and unforeseen circumstances that happen, but in actuality, the fixed income market might be disrupted. The stock market might be super hot,
Right.
or it might be really weak over a period of time that you're going to take this leap of faith to go away from earning a paycheck into earning income from your investments, and that's fraught with anxiety.
It absolutely is. I think psychologically, it is one of the most difficult things that folks go through, is that crossing that threshold from working to not working. And from an investment standpoint, while you're working, declining markets are in kind of a weird way opportunities.
Sure.
Right? Because you're still working, you've still got income, you can survive without using any of the investments, but also hopefully you're able to invest through your 401k or other things to take advantage of those declines. Once you're retired, declining markets can still be opportunities, but I think that the magnification of fear is much greater in retirement than it is while working.
What do you do to curtail that risk, that fear, that anxiety on the cusp of retirement or having to draw from investments and savings?
Well, and I think that's where those two pillars, risk management, right, but more importantly, cash flow engineering is critical. Because if I can sit down with a pre-retiree or retiree and we can understand what's needed, what we're bringing in from dividends and interest, figure out what your spending gap is, and use market profits where possible to refill that gap and satisfy whatever their desired coverage is, a year, 2 years, 5 years, then for us, there's nothing more comforting to a client than knowing that their car was bought with profits, or their family trip was funded with market profits.
So this gives you a lot of leeway for personalization. It's not very cookie cutter. If you could unpack that for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's thank goodness for technology, because I think that what that allows us to do is to take a cookie cutter concept and apply it universally at a very individual level. And I think that's the thing that we're most excited about with this risk management piece and this lifestyle cash piece, because those are completely personalized.
Tax efficiency, I know it's not the most exciting thing to talk about, but nevertheless, it's an important pillar.
Sure.
And we know about tax planning and tax harvesting and being prudent about these things as you approach retirement.
Yeah, so last year, great example, we did tax loss harvesting during the COVID
panic.
Yes, the market down 30, 35%. We actually did some tax loss harvesting, right? So we will take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves.
To bank some net operating losses.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Forward.
Yep, bank some losses, reinvest in similar but different securities. Obviously, no cost for that, given the fee-based environment that we work within. But generating cash and having triggers, selling profits, in and of itself, that is a taxable event. So in general, what we try to do is to say, hey, let's bank whatever profits are necessary for our lifestyle. If you want to take some more, feel free to, but we want to basically just make sure that we're satisfying the spending needs and that we're maintaining the integrity of your risk management, right? So we don't want to just be selling the dogs, the things that haven't performed well, because
they might be necessary in the portfolio.
It's exactly right. That's the zigzag effect. So we tend to try to sell things proportionately that are up, and we try to do them in the most tax efficient way possible. But nonetheless, taking profits does mean having some capital gains.
Documentation and coordination. How did that become its own pillar?
We've always said financial planning is kind of the backbone of what we do. But one of the things that Dalal started before I joined years and years ago was the importance of tax planning, the importance of estate planning, the importance of documenting things, financial and non-financial in your lives, because planning for a long, full life into your mid-90s and the cash flow and risk management associated with that is very important. But you also have to think about the flip side, and that is if something goes terribly wrong. Someone becomes incapacitated, someone passes away prematurely. We want to make sure that we've got continuity, documentation, and everything as buttoned up as humanly possible. So that fourth pillar, most people don't like to think about or talk about, but it's probably the most important.
The interesting thing is you guys are not CPAs or you're not attorneys, but you will sometimes wear a CPA type hat with tax planning and documentation. And you'll also interface with estate attorneys, for example.
100%.
Tell me about that.
I mean, I don't want to say it's a requirement, but it's strongly encouraged because we're all players on the team, right? And the client's the owner. And we kind of take it upon ourselves to be the coordinator of that. So that's where the coordination comes from. We want to do tax planning with clients. We want to do estate planning, make sure that beneficiaries are proper and that we've titled all their accounts properly. And estate laws change, tax laws change. So we need to constantly go back and revisit and redocument those things.
Titling is important, as boring as it might sound to talk about, because you have sometimes older parents, grandparents, don't know where the documentation is kept if something ends up in probate.
Yep.
You guys are keeping this stuff organized in preparation for the foreseen and unforeseen.
Well, I mean, I have a very personal example of this. So unfortunately, my uncle passed away about 1.5 years ago. Very private individual. We had actually provided him with this Everplans process that we do for our clients. And he had filled out maybe 80% of it, which was wonderful because that was so helpful to me as his executor. But the littlest thing, like where's the key to your lockbox at the bank?
Wow.
Right? What's the code to your security system at your house? Right? Things that you'd never think of. I had to break into his house. Right? Police come. Right? So it's interesting. As time has progressed, I have become personally aware of the significance and importance of this documentation and coordination pillar.
And it's also made you more sensitive in my conversation with you about preparation for the survivors.
Yes.
To know, there are always going to be loose ends. There's always going to be a degree of messiness, and nothing is perfectly expected. But how are you helping kind of a sleep insurance, if you will, for people who want to leave an easier time
Yeah.
for their inheritors.
Well, I think, for good or for bad, and I think this is our intent, for good is that we want them to look at us as the source. They come to us, they pick up the phone, they come in, we, give them a hug and let's start rolling up our sleeves.
Wow.
And the more we can have pre-documented these things so there aren't surprises, the more comfortable everyone is going to feel. But ultimately, this is a big responsibility, and that's why that pillar is so important to us, but oftentimes kind of pushed aside by clients.